I have found a great deal of joy personally and as a pastor in the words from the Psalms. And in so many ways, I think, as I've said before, we find ourselves there. We find who we are there. We find our doubts and our fears. We find our joys and our deep faith. We find our confusion and our certainty. We find our holiness and our sin. And interestingly enough, in Psalm 139, it begins with a heading, the inescapable God. The inescapable God, to the leader of David, a psalm, it says. Let me share these words. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know where I sit down and where I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol or hell, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle in the furthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me becomes night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. In March of 2005, the life of 22-year-old Kevin Bertha was, to say the least, a mess and in shambles. Severely mentally ill with deep depression and struggling to cope with recurring thoughts of ending the pain he was experiencing by ending his life. Kevin had lost his job, had major hospital bills that he could not afford as a result of a recent premature birth of his child. Bertha dove to the Garden State Bridge, parked in a parking lot, got out, walked out onto the 1 7/10 expanse of the Golden Gate Bridge, stepped over the railing with his feet rather dangerously going up and down on a small ledge, looking down 202 feet into the cold, cold San Francisco Bay, thinking to himself, the water is my freedom, I'm ready. That could have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. At that very moment, California Highway Patrol Sergeant Kevin, also named Kevin Briggs, whose duty included keeping watch on the bridge, spotted Bertha on the other side of the railing, deep in thought as he clutched the metal structure. Briggs himself had known emotional and physical pain, having been abused as a child physically and sexually, and had more recently just survived painful surgery and doubts about his life as a result of cancer. He calmly approached the railing, and said to Kevin, "Hi." Get this. Calmly said to him, "Hi. Is it okay if I come and speak with you for a while? I'm not going to touch you. I'm just here to talk with you and to listen." 92 minutes later, after Bertha, as he recalls, decided that he would go across the bridge and not destroy himself, for the first time in his life, he shared his deepest and darkest secrets with this patrolman. It appears that he never looked up at him. It appears that he never realized who he was talking to. It was much later, in fact, 8 years later, that he discovered that he was actually talking as a black man about to kill himself with a white cop. And he said to those, when he discovered that later, "I might not have said a word to him if I'd realized he was a white cop." But he did. He did speak to him. And he shared his pain. He shared his agony. He shared his desire to end his life. And listening, Briggs connected with him in a way of intimacy that only could happen by someone and from someone who really cared about people, who could meet him face to face, body to body, pain to pain, suffering to suffering in an intimate way. It's called compassion. Compassion. By the way, he had saved over the course of his career, keeping an eye on people on the bridge, 200 people from committing suicide. The fall of 220 feet was sure without any likelihood that you would die, and oftentimes would be lost to the currents of the water. But he was not lost. He was saved. He was saved by someone who was willing to step over on the other side of the railing to be with him in his pain, with him in his agony, with him in his moments of doubt and his desire to end his life, and to listen to him. To listen to him. And the sharing of his words of agony, of pain, of sadness, of bitterness, the sharing of his words of doubt about his value and his worth, there was a way in which Briggs, the patrolman, could comfort him and encourage him to rethink his decision. Now, you would think that right away after he had crawled over the railing and then had been taken to a hospital, a psychiatric unit, and had spent some time there, that would have made a change in his life. But 8 more years of agony and pain and suffering and severe, as he described it, the deepest depression and doubt he had ever experienced, even before he attempted to commit suicide. The mental health associations nationally decided, after they'd heard this story about this man now who was retiring as a highway patrolman, should join them in some special way and receive not only recognition and an award, but perhaps join them in presenting the story. And so they wondered if there was any way that he had connected with any of the people he had saved over the course of his career. And he said, no. He was hesitant to go to the international conference that had been held, that was to be held. But they wanted to have Kevin, Bertha likewise present. And Briggs knew where the mother was that they had gone to connect with her so that they might be able to help them understand what was going on with this young man. So he made contact with the woman, went to her home, and they arranged for a special trip for him. It was an award that the young man had won, and he was confused by that, but he went. And then he walks into this great area of hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, and there standing next to him in a moment was the man who had saved his life. There's a sense in which it is the way in which God moves in and through us in a way that is so special and unique. I remember the story of Jonah and the whale. Jonah says, I wanted to get away from God. I tried to get away. I went and I ended up in the water and I ended up in a fish. It's a wonderful story. And he said, my life was simpler before, and now I'm going to go talk to these Ninevites whom I think ought to die anyway. And now I talk to them, and indeed, I'm being pursued by God in a way that I had never experienced before. The psalmist says that God is constantly around us. God's words, God's Spirit, the memory we have of who Jesus was and is, the invitation of Jesus that we respond to the needs of others. He speaks to Peter. He says, do you love me, Peter? And he says, yes, 3 times. Then feed my sheep, feed my lambs, feed the adults as well as the children, feed those who are struggling, give them hope. That's the feed that you need to offer. Give them hope, give them the message of the good news. Give them your presence. I'm going to come across that railing, he says. I'm not going to touch you, but I want to listen to you and visit with you. 93 minutes, 22 minutes later, they finally come over the railing and not to the depths of death. The 2 men, by the way, now are very popular presenters all across the nation. As Kevin Bertha talks about his attempting to end his life, seeking a way to end the pain, to find freedom in the depths of the water, and how someone came to him, and how then Kevin Briggs says, this is who you are. This is the call that comes to you to respond to people who are around you. And sometimes it's a simple thing that they say to you or affirm to you by their words or by a look or pain. I remember vividly when Nancy was in the hospital a while back. I can tell the story because she's not here. But she was in the hospital with an emergency, and the doctor said to her, it was a kidney issue, prolapsed bladder rather. And the doctor, as he's walking out of the room, says, if this poisoning of your system continues to work, we may have to do dialysis. And I looked at Nancy immediately, and her face just turned pale. And I knew that dialysis in the mind of most people means that your systems are not working. And I said, the doctor, who already had his hand on the doorknob of the room to leave us, said, stop, come back, and tell Nancy what you just said. And he did. He said, oh, my apologies. I was being a little too cavalier about it. It's easy for me to say it, he said. But that's, so he told her that there was not any chance that she would need to have dialysis permanently, but as soon as they could get that bladder back up where it belonged, she'd be all right. Intimacy. Intimacy is what is called for and from us. As we relate to one another in a loving, caring, gentle, compassionate, forgiving, and accepting way. Whoever comes into this place, whomever you meet out on the street, you will win people over to Jesus by the love that you show them, by the gentleness that you offer, by the kindness that you extend, by your listening to them and not telling them how they should think and behave, but just hearing their message. And then they will want to know, how come you're doing that? And you can share your faith at that point, and they too will then find some possible warmth in that faith, that there is within you the presence of Christ. There is within you the capacity to live as Jesus lived, kindly, gently, compassionately, with a caring outreach, intimately relating and connecting with others. Be vulnerable, be open, and be accepting. That's what intimacy is, and that's what discipleship is called to be. And that's who Jesus was. And that is who the psalmist understood God to be. You're with me wherever I am. And even darkness can become light in your presence. Amen.
Amen.